Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, June the 22nd council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the national anthem. Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a public forum, and we have one person registered, Ms. Yoke Wong, regarding the Council Compensation Review Committee severance bylaw recommendations. Ms. Wong, I see you on the screen there. You've got 5 minutes to address council. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Council and everyone. My name is Yoke Wong, and I have lived in Richmond Hill for over 20 years. I recently served on the Council Compensation Review Committee and appear today to speak about the Council severance policy and why I believe it should change. Next slide. The Richmond Hill Council compensation package is comprehensive and includes a salary, car allowance, disability, health and dental benefits, life insurance, retirement benefits, and a generous severance policy. For their salary, Richmond Hill Council members are getting roughly the same as their peers in towns and cities that deal with much greater budgets for much larger populations. The committee that I was a part of spent 3 months reviewing the current compensation package and made 6 recommendations for the next term of council. The current council has the power to approve, reject, or amend any or all of those recommendations. 2 weeks ago on June the 8th, Council chose to approve the recommendations that increased their compensation and rejected the one recommendation for their severance policy that would decrease it and save the city money. You might ask, why should the Council severance policy be changed? The simple answer is this: times have changed. The Richmond Hill Council severance policy is over 30 years old. Today, severance policies are leaner and more restrictive or non-existent. Today, council members already get fair compensation. Cities are tightening their belts, and residents are demanding fiscal responsibility. Next slide, 3. The Ontario government defines severance pay as compensation that is paid to a qualified employee who has their employment severed. It compensates an employee for losses that occur when a long-term employee loses their job. Did you know that in the private sector, generally, employees get severance when they are let go and not when they die or retire or resign? Imagine if a person went into work tomorrow and handed in their resignation. Would they expect severance pay? And did you know that cities like Brampton, Kitchener, Oakville, and others do not give severance pay to council members, and those that did faced intense public outcry? Richmond Hill's severance policy, enacted in 1991, allows a payout for any reason a council member leaves their post. If they lose a re-election, when they retire or die, if they resign, or if they resign during a term and then go on to win a seat for the very next term. The only exclusion is if, while still on council, they are charged and convicted of legal wrongdoings. This 30-year-old policy has been amended only once in 2001 to increase the payout. How much has the city paid out in severance all these years? To date, about 200 months worth of severance has been paid to 21 council members. As at this year, Richmond Hill is liable for another estimated 77 months of severance. If all 9 members quit tomorrow, the city would pay out roughly $560,000. And if the severance policy remains unchanged for the next term of council, that estimate increases to about $800,000. This is a hefty bill, a financial liability that can only go higher each year, which the city is obliged to pay. Next slide. The committee's recommendation would disallow a severance in all scenarios except when a council member loses in a re-election, similar to a private sector employee being let go from their job. This change will eliminate payout in cases of resignation, retirement, and death. When the motion was put forward on June the 8th without the severance recommendation, one council member raised the idea of a legacy clause, a reasonable compromise, which in hindsight may have swayed the outcome. However, council chose not to amend the motion that day. The motion as is was passed by all members present, without any change to the severance policy, without any savings for the city. Final slide, please. In closing, I would say that the committee made valid arguments of changing times, of fiscal responsibility, public expectation. But it is a tough sell to get council to agree that a change to that 30-year-old severance policy is long overdue. No resident committee will ever be able to do as long as the decision rests solely in the hands of council, whose members benefit personally and financially from the status quo. Perhaps my words today will be cast aside by council, but I hope they resonate loudly and clearly with the residents of Richmond Hill. Times have changed, so should the council severance policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wong. Okay, the next item on the agenda is council announcements. Anybody else have council announcements? Okay, Councillor Munch.
Good day, everybody. Good to see you. Happy summer. Second day of the longest day of the year, I guess. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Liu in his event last week. I was participated in a small way, and it was really a great event. And I thought he did a good job, and I want to thank him on a job well done, the residents that came out. And along that line, it put a lot of pressure on the rest of us on council who are having an event. So I would like to say, for those that want to volunteer, there are lots of events for people to try to help us, for the council that set the bar for the rest of us the rest of the season. And I thank him for the challenge of that. Hopefully we will, as a council and individuals, meet your challenge. So that's first, and second of all. Third of all is, it's kind of interesting. We just had a delegate come forward. News announcements came out this morning that inflation is at 7.7%. That is a worrisome sign for people like us, and we need to really make sure that all of us are catering to the people who are, in harm's way, really, I say, for this high inflationary period, and that we at this council, with regard to the how we're doing with our expenses and how we're doing our budgets, really have to go up. So that's my 3 things. I say congratulations, Councillor Liu. People still come out, and us government people will do our best to make sure that we are on point for the inflationary period. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday was National Indigenous Peoples Day. I just want to take a moment and recognize and acknowledge this day as we celebrate the diverse cultures and exceptional contributions of our Indigenous community this month. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there anybody? Oh, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick thank you to my staff and also to our event services and park staff for helping out at my barbecue. So last Thursday, lots of work, a very good turnout. Thank you, all the residents that came out that day. And thank you, Councillor Munch, for your congratulations. Thank you.
Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. I also want to say happy summer, second day of summer, and Councillor Shepherd already mentioned yesterday is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And also yesterday, as the chair of the city's Economic Development Committee, I'm very proud to join Mayor West, York Region Chair Wayne Emerson at the Coalition Conference in Toronto, whereby that is a formal launch of Richmond Hill's local center for innovation and collaboration. So in addition to Mayor West's address, also the president of the OCAD University, as well as the chair of the eCampus Ontario, all gave remarks, and as well, also a local business person. And I find out that actually they are just located in East Beavercreek, not too far away from us. And it's one of the first group of business entrepreneurs, innovators. And I think that's a great news for the city's economic development, for bright prosperous prosperity. And I want to congratulate our economic development team and everyone have been, really working hard behind the scene for, as far as I'm concerned, I recall almost 10 years now. And so I'm glad that for the city of Richmond Hill, we are putting ourselves in the map. And this is really widely attended coalition conference in Toronto to do a formal launch of our, again, local center for innovation and collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there anybody else? Councillor DiPaolo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, I want to extend a congratulations to the Richmond Hill Board of Trade, who held their golf tournament yesterday. Councillor Shepherd and I represented you there and brought greetings on behalf of council. And it was a very successful event at Eagle's Nest, which it turns out has a very nice view of the city of Richmond Hill. So it's a great place to look at our beautiful city from. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I just would like to also reiterate Councillor Chan's remarks, and it was great to be at the collision conference yesterday. The conference is actually still going on today, I think, for the rest of the week. Really well attended. Apparently there's 37,000 people that have signed up to be at that conference, and we were proud as one of the 9 members of York Region in Richmond Hill to be making an announcement for the CLIC initiative, Center for Local Innovation and Collaboration. And as Councillor Chan said, that's a partnership that we've developed with eCampus Ontario, but also with OCAD University. We've already had, I think it's one cohort of businesses that have gone through that program and benefited from it, and we're hoping for many, many more. If you're interested as a business to participate in the program, there is information on our website. I think it's richmondhill.ca/click, C-L-I-C, no K. So you're welcome to go there, and the businesses that have gone through this so far have benefited from it. So you can learn more about it at that web address. So thanks very much for those announcements, and move on to the next item, which is introduction of emergency and time-sensitive matters.
Point of order.
Councillor?
I continue to ask you to announce the members of council that are in the chamber. And for some reason, you don't want to do this. Is this something that we need to change in the procedural bylaw? It's a disservice to the members that are at home watching the hybrid meeting. They don't know who's in the chamber.
Okay, so I'm happy to announce those folks. I'm sorry that you're upset about that. We have with us today Councillor Shepherd, Regional Local Councillor DiPaolo, myself, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, Councillor Munch, and Councillor Barros. And as you likely can see if you're joining us on live stream, we have Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Liu, and Councillor Chan joining us, online. All right, emergency and time-sensitive matters. Do we have any? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Silovitz. Oh, right. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. It's come to my attention that there were 2 delegates that signed up that contacted the clerk's office a little bit late, Mr. Jay Shea and Mr. Matthew Bergman. So I would ask that we add those two folks to the agenda, and that is on. They're going to be speaking on the agenda item that is the trying to find the number. It is 14.1, the land acknowledgement motion by Councillor Pirelli. It's a member motion. So unless we have any objection to that, I would ask that be adopted as well. So can I have the mover and seconder? Are you okay with that? Okay. All right. So all those in favor of adoption of the agenda? Okay. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay. Disclosure of pecuniary interests or the general nature thereof. Okay. Seeing none. Okay, adoption of previous council minutes. We have the council public meeting on June the 1st and a council meeting on June the 8th. I need a motion for adoption of those 2 together. Councillor Chan, Regional Local Councillor DePaulo. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, so number 8, identification of items requiring separate discussion. We have a delegation on 13.4, so that would be separated, and we have a delegation on 13.7, which would also be separated. And as stated earlier, we have now a delegation, of course, on the member's motion, which would be separated anyway, being that it's a member motion. Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull item number 13.5, renewal and support services of CIS water billing, proprietary software and addition of Infinity Portal.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, that would mean that item number 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, 13.6, 13.8, the correspondence 13.9 and 10 could be adopted on consent, and we'll hold the bylaws until the end. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk? Okay, so I need a motion for the adoption of the remainder of the items. Councillor Shepherd, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, all those in favor? Okay, opposed? That carries. All right, so public hearings, we have none. The first item that we're going to be dealing with today is 11 on the agenda, which is a presentation by Gigi Lee, Director of Financial Services and Treasurer, and Gary Scanlon, Watson Associates regarding the community benefits charge. So I assume, Ms. Lee, you want to kick things off, and Mr. Scanlon after that. If that's not the case, let me know, but otherwise we can get started on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's my pleasure to present to you today an update on the city's community benefits charge strategy and bylaw. Gary Scanlon from Watson Associates will also be joining us virtually for this presentation. A number of legislative changes have made amendments to Ontario's Planning Act and Development Charges Act with respect to how municipalities generate funds from development. Specifically, the Community Benefits Charge, which is a new growth-related funding tool that allows municipalities to levy a charge against development that are more than 5 stories and 10 residential units. Like others across the province, Richmond Hill has been working towards analyzing and adopting a policy approach to the CBC strategy. In May, staff along with Watson made a presentation to council providing an overview of the CBC methodology and approach, which generated some good discussions. Staff also hosted a second virtual consultation meeting in June with Build and the development community to present the CBC strategy and draft bylaw. The feedback received and responses have been appended to the report. Staff are also working through the correspondence received over the last couple of days and will be reporting back at the next council meeting on July 6th. I will now turn it over to Gary Scanlon from Watson Associates, who will walk us through the presentation on the CBC strategy and what it means in a Richmond Hill context.
Good morning,
Mr.
members. of
Scanlon,
council.
go ahead.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be before you once again. So the presentation's up, and I'll try and the first half of it, I think we've gone through in the last presentation. So I'll move through relatively quick on that and then spend a little bit more time on the latter part of the presentation. Next slide, please. And again. So just to recap the process, we have been working with staff since the early part of the year, and we've engaged several times with the development community. And we're to the point now where I think we're approaching the time where council can consider a bylaw. We have released the background strategy, which is a requirement of the legislation, and it's been there for public review. Next slide. And again, please. Just to recap, historically, community benefit charges were those which would be imposed only where you had developments which were of a higher height or an increased density over what would be determined by your zoning or your planning for the different areas. So historically, you could then, if they exceeded that, enter negotiations to receive different types of contributions which would benefit the community in general. The province, going through the review of, if you recall, Bill 108, going through a review of 16 different pieces of legislation. They've refined the Section 37 provisions now to allow for the imposition of a charge for any developments that are 5 stories or greater and contain at least 10 residential units. And if you reach that height or that density or higher, then you can impose a charge of up to 4% of the market value of the land the day before building permit. So but we have to go through a process to justify the 4%. So it could be anywhere between 0 and 4, but it's capped at 4. We can't go in excess of that. Next slide. I'll just recap if you want to look at the methodology that we've provided. This is set out in chapter 3 of the report, but we start with the amount, type, and location of growth. We consider projects which are basically not DC eligible. So it's not works that we would normally include in the development charge. It would consider things such as heritage or cultural matters, municipal parking, municipal administration buildings, affordable housing provisions, etc. So these are things that we cannot include in the DC, but under the CBC, we could consider projects and make a contribution towards those works. And as we go through, there are deductions similar to that's the orange, what we normally would deduct as part of a development charge. So there's some similarities in the calculation. And we come down with a net amount of projects, and we divide that by our forecasted growth, which are only for those units that meet that criteria, 5 stories or greater, and contain at least 10 residential units. And with that, we need to identify the appropriate area in which those developments will occur, and then an estimate of the land value. So we come up with a net amount of projects as the numerator, and we divide that by the calculation of the land area that we're forecasting that have these higher density developments times the average value of the land, appraised value of the land. And I'll show you in a little bit more detail those calculations as we proceed. Next slide. And again, please. The growth forecast over the next 10 years, so we've used a 10-year planning horizon, and you can see that we've split out the development between Low density, that's your singles and semi-detached. Medium density, which is townhouses. And then even with apartments, not all apartments, so your high density would be eligible, meeting this criteria. So only about 90% of the apartments would be eligible for this DC calculation. And we've identified by area where these developments would occur. Next slide. We have the city's employed Antec appraisal firm to assist us in identifying land values throughout the city in order to use those average land values as part of our calculations. And generally, the weighted averages that we have are the Yonge Street corridor, which is south of Elgin Mills, is estimated at about 13.6 million per acre. The area north of Elgin Mills along Yonge Street is almost 6.8 million. And then all other areas average about just under $7 million an acre. Next slide, please. So as I say, we need to consider the land value and apply that against the estimated area of the land where these developments are going to occur. So of the almost 6,000 units, you can see approximately half of those units are estimated to occur along the Yonge Street corridor south of Elgin Mills. And that translates, those 3,148 units translates into about 16 acres of land. So we've taken those 16 acres, we've multiplied it by 13.59 million, and the land value associated with that. So if we were taking building permits today for all of those developments, we would be looking at the development of land of about $218 million worth of value. And we've done a similar calculation for Yonge Street north of Elgin Mills. They've got about 9.3 acres, and that's times 6.8 million. And similarly, all other areas, about almost 16 acres of land, and times that by about $7 million per acre. So in total, once we take all of that development, then our denominator, so remember, we're looking at project costs and we're dividing it by an estimated land value. The land value as the denominator is $392 million. Next slide, please. And again, we've worked with staff to identify projects. So these projects are in part arising from your 10-year capital budget. There are projects that are contained within master plans or other initiatives of council or staff. So we've worked to consider all the different types of projects we may include. They could be, as I say, non-development charge projects, could include municipal administration building expansions, museums, public art, heritage, affordable housing, public realm improvements, planning related studies that aren't eligible under the DC, et cetera. So there's a number of items there. Also, we'd consider historically when you have collected under the old Section 37, do some of those types of projects continue? And then parkland acquisition, as long as it's in excess of what you would normally recover from your normal parkland bylaw, then we can top up the parkland acquisition as well. As I say, we've tried to stay away from development charge related projects, even though in certain instances we could consider them, but we've tried to keep the development charge services completely separate so that there's clarity in between what the CBC money is going to be used for versus what the development charge money will be used for. So that last bullet we did not use. Next slide. When you saw in the part of the calculations, we need to start with gross cost, make a number of deductions, and then we start with a net cost. And that's that dark blue box that's on the left-hand side. Similar to DCs, when we do the calculations and we spread these costs across all development, so in the development charge, we allocate projects against non-residential growth. So a portion of growth would pick up, the non-residential would pick up that cost. And then a larger amount would be picked up by the residential. And then if you look at spreading those costs against all different categories of residential cost, you can see where the allocation or where the money is arising from. And that's what this schematic's meant to do. These are more of the city-wide types of projects, things such as parks, recreation, cultural, library type of projects are handled a little bit different. I'll show you that in a minute, but these are the broader city-wide projects. As we step across, you can see if we ended up with a net cost of $100, we would deduct, or 15%, if we were doing a development charge, 15% or $15 of that would be recovered from the residential sector, leaving about $85 to be recovered from residential. When we move to the next level, and this is because of the CBC, we can't collect from low and medium density. So we lose about 64% of that $85 goes to the low and medium. So that's losing about $48. So we're left with about 36% of the 85. And then as we go to the next block, you can see 10% of the high density won't meet the criteria of 5 stories and 10 units. So by the time we get to the end of the gross of the net costs, these community benefit charge will allow you to pick up about 27% or generate revenue to about 27% of that net cost. So we can't recover all of these costs from the CBC, but the CBC will contribute a portion of it. In this particular case, for these types of projects, you'll get 27% of that net cost. And if we go to the next slide, things such as more cultural related projects, you'll see that we can pick up about 31% of those costs from the CBC. Next slide. And again, please. So looking at the listing of costs, you can see we've categorized the different types of projects or services. We have CBC strategies, municipal parking, general administration space, streetscaping, traffic safety, affordable housing, public realm, and parkland acquisition. So in total, with staff, we've identified about $123 million of projects. And of those projects, you can see on the very left-hand side, in theory, we could fund $32 million from the community benefit charge towards those projects. But if we take the 32 million and divide it by, remember that land value calculation we did, the 392, doing the calculation of 32 million divided by 392 million, we end up with 8.3% calculated charge for the CBC. The legislation caps us at 4%. So even though we can justify going up to 8.3%, we cannot go any higher than 4%. That means that all of these priority works that we've identified with staff cannot be fully funded. So it will mean that during the capital budget process, there'll have to be discussions through the capital budget process with council to see the highest priority projects where the CBC money can be allocated. Next slide, please. And again, there are mandatory exemptions. So these are what the legislation provides. So once again, if the development doesn't meet the criteria of 5 stories and 10 residential units, then, and whether it's new development or redevelopment, it applies consistently against both. So you have to have that minimum 5 stories and 10 units. Long-term care, retirement homes, university colleges, indigenous institutions are exempt. Different types of buildings associated with the Canadian Legion, nonprofit housing, and hospices, all are not, will not pay the CBC because of the mandatory provincial exemptions. Next slide. And next steps. So that is where we're at, Mr. Mayor and Council. All of this is documented in that CBC strategy. And we would look for your consideration of the bylaw on July the 6th. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Scanlon. So, Council, we've got one delegation which we'll hear in a moment, and then we'll. What I would suggest maybe is we spend some time at this point if there's any questions about this. I believe this was referred from a previous special council meeting. So, what I would suggest is open the floor to questions at this point in time. Then we'll deal with the delegation, and then we'll deal with the matter in front of us, which is item 13.4. Seeing no objection to that, is there any questions then of Mr. Scanlon and Ms. Lee? Okay, Councillor Munch.
Thank you. Once again, great seeing you. Fantastic presentation. Job well done. Love the information. And as I said earlier in my announcements, very, very concerned about the current economic climate and how we are going to get through it. I haven't seen it in 30 years, so it really going to take some vigilance and high level given our finance situation. My question to you is, it's interesting when I saw the valuations of land and the valuation of land south of Elgin Mills versus north of Elgin Mills and then all of Richmond Hill. That to me seems remarkable that north of Elgin Mills on Yonge Street would have the lowest property values on a major artery when we have a transit corridor, heavy investment there that should bring valuations up, generally speaking. So thoughts on that?
I know that Antec had considered, and as all appraisers would do, they would take a look at historic sales data in the different areas. They would consider the density, the different aspects of the land, you know, the densities, as well as, you know, their proximity to different types of items. The weighting that we've done has considered, so we worked with staff, we've looked at the where the development's occurring and how much will occur in these different areas. And there may be some of those lands which, or some of the development of the lands which will occur, and maybe they're running at a higher, let's say, I'll just use a figure off the top of my head, it's not accurate, let's say $15 million. But maybe for that corridor, we would only anticipate about 10% of that corridor having the development in that area. And the rest of the area may have 90% of that corridor, and maybe their values are running at $8 or $9 million. So when we've done the average weighting, it would, you know, even though it's a higher amount in one certain area, when we do the weighting of the development times the amount of land value, we end up with the amount that we've identified. So it will in part be a function of how much of that development occur and this more of the site specific aspects of the land.
So we have a key development area in the north of Elgin Mills. And when we have a key development area, one of two having, as you said, if we were to isolate that, fine, but it's very worrisome for a municipality that's putting in 2010. Now, if we as a council need to make an amendment or make changes or rethink how we're going to be surviving long term, because if you don't have a vibrant key development area with the massive amount of investment that's there, and you have a Yonge Street corridor, it's a real stigmatism that we should be like alarm bells going off crazy in my view, because you have the highest, densest, most value proposition having the lowest valuation in a municipality that's got a green belt that we want to preserve. We want a Yonge Street corridor as per the 2019 report of our DCs. So was that looked at too as a factor, or why that happened? Why we're here?
Well, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, at the end of the day, the calculations that we're doing are to facilitate the 4% calculation. Once you approve the bylaw, that 4% will be applied against whatever the value of that particular development is as it comes forward for building permit. So within those areas, Councillor, if the land value associated with the individual ones are 15, 18, 20 million per acre, then it would be the $4 million times the true value at the time of building permit of that individual land. For the calculations right now, we've done a weighting, and that's where it may appear to be low. But your observation's absolutely right. If you're right in that that 500 meters of the the GO station, then the land values will be considerably higher because of the associated densities, and you will then charge 4% times whatever the value of that land is at that particular point. So we haven't, it's not a lost opportunity. It's the weighting calculation that we did that may appear a little bit out of step with your perceptions.
Yeah. So my concern looking at the report and where you're at is that if we don't get growth where we are designing and planned growth for 15 years for the next 20 years, that's 35 years of loss. And that puts a lot of pressure on the rest of Richmond Hill and the TOCs and the provincial government that's going to step in on that regard. Means that type of concept will likely continue because we are unable to, for whatever reason, allow the market condition to achieve its necessary need relative to our investments. And if we have an inflationary period like we have upon us right now, that people feel on the ground now, and now it's being published. And this morning on CBC, the chief economist of BMO said it 9 times that we are headed for a recession. For those people that aren't aware of what a recessionary period is looking like, we better this report is a slap where we're at because our internal inflation here at this government, Richmond Hill's done pretty well at 60% above inflation. Our cost of government is 60% more. York Region is more than double that. And it's a real concern for me when I see these reports and I see where government costs are going, heading potentially to a recessionary period and high inflation. People can't afford to do business or work here. And we're not going to get the public investments. And that's real problematic 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So I say this to my colleagues, I hope you take this report really seriously because this means real ramifications in the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And it's a rabbit hole that we don't want to go down and we may not be able to get out of. So I thank you so much for your report. I really enjoy I spend a lot of time reading your stuff, so I really doing a great job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Silovitz.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Scanlon, thank you very much. As always, your presentations are on point. Just a couple of things I'd like to ask you through the mayor. What you presented to us this morning, you don't define the Richmond Hill Centre in the south area of our municipality. You break up Young Street from either north of Elgin Mills or south of Elgin Mills. But you don't specifically mention the Richmond Hill Centre, which, should the EMZO, which is now placed on that land, now come to fruition, there's tens of millions of dollars that would come out of that development. Through you, Mr. Mayor, can you tell me why that is not included in this as something specific?
Well, through the mayor, the way that we've summarized the areas, so we've summarized it into 3 different categories. And it was considerable amount of discussion in between ourselves and planning and others, but to see how we might summarize or organize the areas. In part, it's how we were getting the appraisal information. So, which could be in broader areas as defined by Antec, as well as, our best estimate working with planning of the developments coming through the process. So we decided to break it into those 3 categories: the Yonge Street corridor, north and south, and then all other areas. So that information is in there, but it hasn't been isolated as its select area. It's been incorporated within those broader categories that we've presented.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. I totally understand what you're saying. However, in my opinion, I believe that that area should have been separated out because it is so significant as to what we are expecting there now that there's an EMZO there. And yes, it is, a telescope many years into the future, but I think it's still of import to the city as to what the value of CBCs in that specific area actually mean to the city. But thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. The second question to you, Mr. Mayor, is just something to help me in my head. Do the new CBCs, does that completely replace Section 37s, or do Section 37s still apply to less than 5 and less than 5 stories and less than 10?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the legislation completely replaces what was there before. And as I say, the new rules are, so rather than just hitting very select high density types of developments, they now lowered the bar and you're spreading it across many more. But, the new density now is 5 stories and 10 units. So it's a brand new tool, actually. They've redefined it.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I thought that was it, but I just wanted to make sure. I think also the name community benefits charges is so much better than Section 37. That always reminded me of some kind of MASH psychiatric attachment. So I much prefer community benefits charges, and I think it's much clearer also for our residents to understand that. Thank you very much for all your work as always.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else? I don't have any other questions from anybody at this time. Sorry, at this time. Okay, I have one. Just thank you, Mr. Scanlon, for your presentation, as always. So with all of the changes that have happened and the implementation of this community benefits charges, has there been any work done with a conclusion, or can you comment on what is the net difference for the municipality between what we would have had in the past with the old regime of regulations versus what we're having now under this regime? Is there any contemplation as to how we're going to fare as a municipality, one versus the other?
Mr. Mayor, I recall having similar information, but I don't have it at hand. I'm not sure if Gigi has that information close at hand. If not, we'd be happy to circle back with that information for you.
Okay, I'd be interested to know that if at all possible. Miss Lee, do you have some additional information?
We don't have it on hand. We'll provide it at the next meeting.
Okay, all right, that's great. Thank you. Okay, that's all my questions, and seeing no others, what I would suggest now at this time is to move to the first delegation. Right. Okay, thank you. So let's have a motion to receive the presentation. Councillor Munch, was that a stretch? Okay, Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Shepherd. So all those in favor of receipt of the presentation? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you. So moving on then to delegations. Delegation 12.1 is Mr. Adam Layton from Evans Planning regarding the community benefits charge strategy, which is item 13.4. So Mr. Layton, I see you on the screen there. You've got 5 minutes to address council.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It is a pleasure to be before you once again on this wonderful sunny morning. With respect to the proposed community benefits charge, we have provided correspondence outlining our concerns with respect to one specific project, which we are nearing completion of the site plan process for. And you may recall considering earlier this year, it is located at 13351 and 13359 Yonge Street, at the corner of Yonge Street and Ridge Road. It is a proposal for 50 stacked townhouse dwellings with an underground parking garage accessed off of Ridge Road. As noted previously, council had elected to approve the zoning in principle. It's our understanding that the final bylaw may actually be before council for approval at the next meeting in July. And we've been working through the remaining site plan issues. And the reason that that I'm delegating today with respect to the community benefits charge is, as noted, the charge really only is meant to apply to developments over 5 stories and with more than 10 units. So the definition on how the determination of what constitutes a story is essential. With respect to this development, and I missed earlier, I'm representing the owner, Young Ridge Developments, Inc. There is quite a bit of a grade change between the site and the level of the roads, both on Young Street and on Ridge Road. As I outlined in my letter, in fact, the access to the underground garage from Ridge Road is at grade with Ridge Road, but once one goes into interior to the site, it is below grade. It's about a 3-meter difference. And in recognition of this, the site-specific bylaw is we've been working on with staff is likely to include a specific grade or elevation above sea level as, quote, established grade for the purposes of calculating height. And it will also include a provision, which is fairly standard, I'm sure you're used to seeing, which outlines that a rooftop access, which contains only a landing from a staircase and mechanical area and no other living space, and is meant to access a rooftop terrace, is not considered a story. That is consistent with the Ontario Building Code, and it, in our experience, is the position taken by planning and building staff for what we call pop-ups of this type, which again are really only meant to access a rooftop patio or terrace. Unfortunately, within the current draft of the community benefits charge, the definition of story does not go into this level of fine-grained detail. So we are unable to determine whether such a pop-up would be considered a story and thus be a 5th story. I would also note that under the official plan, this property would be in the Oak Ridges Local Center, which has a height limit of 4 stories. So in all other respects, from a planning perspective and from a zoning perspective and from an OBC perspective, this proposal is 4 stories or perhaps less, depending on how one interprets the OBC. We're just looking for some consistency in the application of the definition of story and grade across all the documents to ensure that there's no confusion and to ensure that this project, which otherwise conforms with the official plan, would not be subject to the community benefits charge. So we've outlined our asks. With specifically, we think this can be addressed through some tweaks to the definitions in the bylaw. With respect to the definition of grade, we would suggest that where a site-specific definition of established grade is provided in a zoning bylaw, that be used for the determination of established grade for the purpose of the community benefits charge. And additionally, that the definition of story be revised to address these types of pop-ups or rooftop accesses, which contain no living area. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that concludes my comments on the matter. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Layton. Interesting comments, and it sounds like a very technical bit of input, so thank you. All right, so at this time, I'd like to bring forward item number 13.4. So we have a staff recommendation in the staff report that all comments be received by council and that a draft bylaw be considered at the July 6th council meeting. So at this time, I'd ask for speakers on that, on the CBC recommendation. Councillor, Regional Local, Councillor DePaulo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to move the staff recommendations under this community benefit charges strategy. I think it's been very well explained to us. I like the change. I think it's going to put our municipality in a position where we can better plan for our public infrastructure that is required to accompany any new developments in the city. So I think we've got a good outline and a great presentation of what we can expect as to receive as we go forward, and a good strategy to properly allocate those dollars where needed. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, we have a motion then on the floor. I would need a seconder. Councillor Silovitz, do you want to speak to this? Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion in front of us? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. All right, moving along. The next delegation is Debbie George regarding the Shirley laneway issue, and she's on the Shirley laneway committee. And this is item number 13.7. So, Ms. George, I see you there on the screen. If you want to turn your video on and unmute yourself, you've got 5 minutes to address council.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay.
And go ahead. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. The Shirley Drive Laneway Committee first presented to council on February the 23rd of this year with a member's motion put forward by Castro Liu, requesting that the city assume the laneway, the Shirley Drive laneway, to be in line with all the other city-owned and operated laneways. City staff were tasked with producing a report to come back to council today with proposed options. I would like to thank the city staff for this mammoth effort to bring such a comprehensive report to council today. The Shirley Drive committee members and the community, our community, would like to request a deferral at this time to allow us sufficient time to apply the focused review that the report deserves. We believe that the information presented by staff warrants detailed examination by our homeowners and further research to confirm the viability of the options that were proposed. We will use the report as a basis to continue discussions with the city and the residents group to find a solution that fits the uniqueness of our situation. Constituents put trust in their elected councillors, and we feel we must do our due diligence and do further homework to ensure the very best solution is chosen. As you will appreciate, a vote today would not be possible without a 100% approval by all 54 homeowners, as directed in our shared facilities agreement, which governs our laneway. Therefore, we must revisit the owner's sentiments at this time on the future of the laneway and call a special meeting to ensure that all owners are aware of the full impact of this staff report. So for this, we will request, or we will need additional time, and therefore we do request a deferral. We thank you again for your understanding, and we do look forward to finding a suitable solution in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. George. So I'll bring this back to council at this time. This is Councillor Liu's ward. So Councillor Liu, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Debbie, for making that delegation. I don't have much to add. Respectfully, I would like to make a motion to defer this agenda item to the September meeting. I would like to thank staff for doing such a great job. This is a very comprehensive and detailed report, very good analysis. The residents need some time to digest and to go back and discuss among themselves. So I agree that we need more time for that. So I would like to make a deferral to the September meeting. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Liu. Councillor Pirelli, you've had your hand up. You're willing to second that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion. Thank you to the delegate. Our residents' input is our most valuable source of information. Clearly, there's a detailed report before us with a lot of information and a lot of options. And those options have financial consequences, and the residents need to be very well aware of which one they want to pick. They'll have a couple of months before our September meeting to go over it with the Residents Association and the local councillor, and I'm sure that we'll have their opinion come the September meeting, and that's why I'm seconding the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Munch.
Good day. Thank you. I too will support the motion, and I applaud the Resident Association, the local councillor Castro Liu, and Miss George for doing all that they're doing. I hope get the community together. Let's figure it out and get this where we need to get this. And if they need more time, fully supportive of that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else at this time? Okay, Councillor Chan.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that delegate said it all. And also the local councillor also have asked for a deferral. I think in this particular case that as speakers before me have said, other than option 3, meaning that municipal assumption of the laneway, which we would certainly have to discuss about all the ramification. And so far as the residents, certainly the other 2 options, whether staying status quo or converting the current arrangement in the condominium structure, not just money-wise, but also legal and also management and other more longer-term ramification. So I think it's appropriate and it's proper. And the only question I wonder is whether even September is good enough, because knowing that's in the summer, but I would assume the local councillor would sort of consult with the residents because at the end of the day, like one of the options, for example, or maybe all options, we need the consent probably to have all the unit owners. So I'm in support of it because certainly a lot to digest and assess the ramification by the homeowners there. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Liu, for bringing forward that. And I think the delegate said it all, and happy, to support this and give them more time. So I guess Councillor Liu would think that September is probably good enough during the summertime to go over that. No problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Chan. Anybody else? I'll just briefly, I agree that I think a deferral is the way to go here. And so thank you, Councillor Chan and Ms. George for recommending that. In reading the staff report and speaking to staff, it really is a very complex issue that has a lot of facets that need to be looked at by both us on council, but also by the owners of the property. So I think time is a good way to go on this particular issue to get this done right for the community and to make sure that the folks that are in that those units are aware of all of the different facets of this. So anyway, that would be my comment. I don't see any other comments at this time. So we have a motion to defer to the September council meeting on the floor. All those in favor? Okay, and opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda then is the 2 delegations that we added. Mr. Jay Shea, if you are available, we'll have you come on and speak to item 14.1. Mr. Bergman's going first? Oh, okay. All right. Well, if Mr. Bergman is available, we get Mr. Bergman up. Okay, welcome, Mr. Bergman. You've got 5 minutes to address council.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us last minute. We were just a little late registering. I'm not sure if you noticed, our group Indigenous Action Committee was on the front page of the Liberal this week, in the Toronto Star, bringing positive news to Richmond Hill for a change. And we have our event obviously coming up this Saturday, June 25th at Elgin Barrow Arena for Indigenous People Day. And we've basically brought you forth our land acknowledgement today, and we've given it to Councillor Pirelli because a lot of time has gone by now since the last time we were here talking about this. And we have reached out to Mayor West several times to have a meeting and discuss this whole situation and find a resolution. And I guess, you have a busy job and you haven't had time to see us. So we figured instead of what happened last time, which is you guys spent 2.5 years and $20,000+ talking to Indigenous people for, I believe, 4 hours and 2.5 years, we figured we'd save the tax dollars for the residents of Richmond Hill and just pass along our suggestion for our land acknowledgement. And we gave it to Councillor Pirelli because he has been very supportive of our group and what we're trying to do. And so we hope that you guys can pass this thing today. I mean, we are the residents of this neighborhood. I work in Richmond Hill. I live in Thornhill. Jay lives in Richmond Hill. Sarah, our other member, lives in Richmond Hill. We've all just, come up with this, and we're for free giving it to you because we didn't want you guys to pass that other treaty acknowledgement, which you wrote, because it was offensive. And so we didn't want you to make that mistake. So we're trying to help the city by guiding you in the right direction. So this is pretty much why we've given this to Councillor Pirelli, and we appreciate his help and his support and the support of all of you, because I mean, this has been a great experience for us so far. And I'd also like to thank Jen and Karen in the permits department, and Donald Hearn, who's been awesome. And we're putting on all our events and we're trying to bring our community together here, and we really appreciate the opportunity that you guys have given us to do that. And so yeah, that way I just wanted to clarify why we've done it this way. It was just so we could get it done and save the taxpayers money and have it done now, so that we don't have to keep talking about it or hearing about it. Because I mean, you guys were literally ready to pass that other thing months ago, and it was offensive. I mean, you were calling Indigenous people the people of the Williams Treaty, which is offensive. And we've consulted with lots of elders and lots of people in the community about all of this stuff. And so this is what we've come up with. And we hope you guys can just pass this today, and going forward, you can do this good land acknowledgement that we feel is suitable. And if not, then if not. But that's up to you guys. And I appreciate the time today, and I'll pass it over to Jay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bergman. Mr. Shea, you're the next person on our list. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, council, city staff, and everyone watching at home. It's been a while. Good to be back and see many of your faces. As many of you know, I'm Jay Shea. I'm James Bay Cree. I'm a husband, a father of two, and a resident of Richmond Hill. I'm also the co-founder of the IAC and Circle of Friendship. I would like to give a big thank you to City Council and staff for all the work and support you have shown our committee and community. Since our first gathering on September 30th to recognize the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, we have proudly been continuing to bring our community together through other events such as International Women's Day, National Awareness Day for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women, and our upcoming event this Saturday for Indigenous Celebration Day at Algoberos Arena from 1 to 5. What started as a small gathering of 20, maybe 30 people, each event has grown, and we're expecting attendance of north of 250 people this weekend. We have nearly 20 Indigenous vendors signed up, a traditional big drum, singers, dancers, live music, as well as traditionally made corn soup, bannock, and strawberry juice for everyone to enjoy. Again, a Chi wedge to our community, supporters, sponsors, and the city, as well as many thoughtful donations to help make this all possible. We have a couple people on Facebook that are looking to discredit our group. Yes, we are a grassroots organization that hasn't been together for a long time, but the impact we are making in our community has been quick, inclusive, encouraging, and very rewarding. We have met so many Indigenous people in Richmond Hill and the surrounding areas that continue to tell us that they thought they were the only ones, and are so happy our generation has stepped up to the plate and working on real accomplishments. For all the naysayers out there, I encourage you to come join us this Saturday and support the Indigenous community that is coming from all over York Region, the GTA and beyond, learn about our culture, speak to some elders, and most importantly, support these families at the craft vendor tables. Since 2019, when then Councillor David West created a motion for land acknowledgement, we have seen this turn into a political circus. With my own very eyes and ears, I have witnessed some rather insensitive comments from people on council, and I decided I would put in the effort to work with what seemed to be non-allies and do my best to open their eyes, ears, and hearts. Today is going to be an interesting discussion. We have some members of the council that just a couple years ago voted against a land acknowledgement and are now in a position to actually support one. We have members of this council that have always been in support of a land acknowledgement, but are some of them sour after an Indigenous group called them out on presenting a treaty acknowledgement as a land acknowledgement? What I do know is after 2+ years and probably tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money for consulting, the city of Richmond Hill has not implemented a land acknowledgement. While a motion was referred back to consult our group along with others regarding this topic, this has not been the case. I want to be transparent about this. We have made many offers to sit down with members of council, and the only person to actually sit with us was Pirelli. Thank you for that. While we've been working with amazing city staff on real initiatives, shout out to Donald and his team, that are impacting our community, in regards to consulting on this topic, we've only received a letter from a member of the mayor's staff requesting that we provide a land acknowledgement that we feel is appropriate, and they would get back to us on setting up a meeting. So here we are, an Indigenous grassroots group formed in Richmond Hill, all volunteering our time away from our 9-to-5s and our families to be back here to present something that's inclusive, honors the caretakers of this land before us, our neighboring communities today, with an acknowledgement to move forward with open minds and hearts that helps with real reconciliation. We have presented this land acknowledgement as a thank you for all the support you've given us. We want to save everyone additional time, resources, and money, and finally put an end to this motion. And there's no better time than National Indigenous History Month and a day after National Indigenous Peoples Day. The door is still open to sit down and collaborate on this land acknowledgement. And I believe that the council has referred to this as a living document in the past. We will just not accept being called the Williams Treaty people. Moving forward, I hope everyone can set aside their political agendas, their alliances, and move forward together with good hearts, minds, and goals, representing our community and city with pride, promise, and action. I appreciate this time. Let's get this done and celebrate together on Saturday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shea. So we've got a motion then before us. Councillor Pirelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Mr. Bergman and Mr. Shea for their delegation, and thank you for council for allowing them to speak today. I want to address three things. The first is that this council passed a motion previous that staff should consult with the Indigenous community, specifically including the Indigenous Action Committee, which is the only organization registered in Richmond Hill, potentially in York Region, and to come up with a land acknowledgement that was not offensive, as Mr. Shea has stated. It's unfortunate that staff haven't made a better effort to communicate with this organization and the community at large, but we are here today, and the reason this council turned down the original land acknowledgement is it wasn't a land acknowledgement, it was a treaty acknowledgement. So we have something here that was created by the Indigenous community for the Indigenous community. The second thing I want to address is the comments that we received via email from a few people suggesting that this council refer the motion back to staff. We've already done that, and staff have done what they did. We are here in a position to pass a land acknowledgement that it was approved by the Indigenous community. As you heard from the delegates, they did extensive consultation with their elders, with their community, far and wide, and came up with a respectful land acknowledgement, factual and respectful. The last thing I want to address is that I was one of those people that Mr. Shea referred to, that I didn't want to vote in favor of the previous land acknowledgement for the very reasons stated. I didn't believe it was respectful. This one is. I'm happy that the group has reached out to me. I'm happy to bring it forward on behalf of the Indigenous community, not simply the Indigenous Action Committee, but the community at large. I'm pleased to hear that staff have done an amazing job working with them in terms of getting them the rental space that we spoke of, the council approved, and that they're actually doing something with that and putting on events and building a base for the Indigenous community here in Richmond Hill, and I dare to say, for all of York Region. I think they're going to do amazing things in the future to come. As they stated, I support this organization. I support the Indigenous community, and I'll do what I can. There's no need to refer this back to staff. This is the consultation of the Indigenous community. The Indigenous community knows what's best for the Indigenous community. And I hope that all members of council will support this, especially Indigenous Peoples Month and Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday. And I hope to see everybody on council at the event on Saturday to show our support of the Indigenous community, especially Indigenous Month. And so I hope that it's unanimous, and I look forward to hearing comments from my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Munch?
Good day. So this topic keeps coming back and back. It seems to be a topic for our council and others in the community. And I think it's time that we start progressing to a movement and move beyond this talk. And I think this is a modest approach to start this. And I say, let's move forward. So I support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor DiPaolo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have got some information through to the clerk earlier, and I'd like to move a referral motion on this item. I don't doubt the ILA's doing wonderful things and that they will do wonderful things in the future in Richmond Hill. I think that they're a group that needs to be supported and promoted and heard and listened to when it comes to what we're going to do with our land acknowledgement. But my understanding is that our staff, following the unanimous direction of council to hire a consultant, has done so. Maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, I could confirm that. City Manager, is that correct?
Ms. Jocelyn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, city staff have been working on this over the past number of months, and we have retained an Indigenous expert consultant to assist us with council's direction from November.
Okay, so fantastic. Mr. Clerk, if you could put that on the screen, a referral motion that I sent in earlier. I think that work needs to be continued. It was just a few months ago that council unanimously directed our staff to do this, and they're in the process of coming back now. Obviously, they need to incorporate the suggested land acknowledgement that's been submitted, and consultation needs to happen. I wish the Indigenous Action Committee in Richmond Hill all success with their event on this weekend, and but I think we need to once again just vet this through the person that's been hired. We have gone out and we've hired someone who's an expert in the field, and I think it's important that happens before we come back to council with something that we can all unanimously get behind. And it is a living document. It's a work in progress. We're going to do the best we can to consult with everyone and do the right thing at the end of the day. There has been a lot of talk about this, a lot of change back and forth, but I'll tell you, I've come to realize that this is extremely important, Mr. Mayor. We have to get it right, and we have to consult all parties to get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we have a proposed
Point of order.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the clerk. And we already voted on this back in November. Would a motion to reconsider be appropriate at this time, procedurally speaking? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the wording, I actually don't think it would be necessary because this is adding to that motion to refer the original language. So this is actually building upon that. It's not a complete, I would say, change of course of action. That would be my opinion.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, you're suggesting that the November motion did not direct staff to hire a consultant? As is stated in the referral motion? What is materially different from this that we passed back in November that you suggest that there doesn't require a motion to reconsider?
Thank you. In November, council considered bylaw 143-21, which was a bylaw to amend the procedure bylaw to include land acknowledgement as part of council meetings. That was based on an October decision of council. At that meeting on November 10th, council passed a motion to refer that included the following clause, that's staff be directed to have further consultations with the Indigenous community on wording for the land acknowledgement, and then staff report back to council on a revised land acknowledgement at a future council meeting. So it's my opinion that this motion to refer is merely adding to it. What it is doing. So council had previously directed staff to consult. This motion would actually add the proposed language in your members' motion to that consultation. So it's complementary. It's not contradictory. It's not changing the direction. It's just adding to that direction.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. This referral motion states that we're going to do consultation. I heard from the city manager that we've hired a consultant. Where in the motion in the past did council direct staff to hire a consultant?
Okay, actually, this is not a point of order, Councillor Prelli. If you can wait.
Point of clarification.
Well, there is no point of clarification. So
Yeah,
if
I'm
I could
trying-
ask,
I'm-
excuse me.
Excuse me.
Excuse
Let
me.
me finish.
If I could
trying
ask
to
you
get
to, these are questions that we've already established that you've made a point of order. My ruling on the point of order is that the clerk has given an opinion that this is appropriate to go ahead with this. What I would ask is that question would be fine to ask in your turn to speak, which I presume will come up shortly. Okay, I need a seconder on this motion at this time. Councillor Shepherd, did you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you to Mr. Bergman for speaking and for putting forth your version of the acknowledgement. You've kindly advised us as to the importance of selecting the right wording that correctly captures the essence of what we're trying to accomplish as a municipality, which is to create the type of wording that we can proudly recite without any type of offense to any member of our Indigenous community. Thank you, Mr. Shea, for speaking out and for informing the public about your group. I think the work you're doing is extremely important, and we're very much looking forward to attending your event on Saturday. As you know, I have never had any type of communication from your group requesting a conversation on the subject of the land acknowledgement, but we'll be happy to have these conversations with you so I'm better educated on the subject. As my colleague, Regional Local Councillor DePaulo stated in his motion, Council actually on June 23rd, 2021, in that Council meeting, decided and voted to hire a consultant, Indigenous consultant, which I understand now has been hired, and the city is in the process of coming up with the correct wording that is all encompassing and representative of all the voices of our Indigenous community in Richmond Hill. So I'd be happy to support the referral motion until such time that our consultant has looked into the wording. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the clerk, when was this authorized by council to hire an Indigenous consultant? When was that motion?
To my knowledge, that was not a council decision. I would have to defer to the city manager for any other information.
Go ahead, Ms. Jocelyn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. During the November discussion that council had on the land acknowledgement and the direction that we were receiving, there was a lot of discussion at the meeting that our outreach to the community should involve an Indigenous expert or an elder at the time. Creating land acknowledgement is certainly a sensitive political exercise that we certainly have been through. And working with an expert, an Indigenous expert on land acknowledgement creation can provide us expertise that a typical city staff may not have. So it was at my direction to staff administratively to assist with the workload and the implementation of this staff direction that we proceed to retain a consultant with expertise in this, an Indigenous consultant with expertise in this area.
Sorry, my question was, when did council authorize the expenditure of monies and how much to hire an expert consultant, as you stated earlier? That was my question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The council did not provide staff direction specifically to hire an Indigenous consultant. The direction to hire an Indigenous consultant came through my office due to the political sensitivity of this item and to ensure that we had the expertise and experience we needed for the full community outreach.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I'll try to be as delicate as I can. I think it's been suggested that council directed the hiring of a professional. Council never gave that direction. I don't think it's appropriate to spend any money to hire, quote unquote, an expert. The terms and conditions of hiring that expert were never discussed by members of council, were never approved. I don't know who this expert is. I don't know why they claim to be an expert. I do know that council's direction was clear. Consult with the community. Indigenous community, not hire an expert to do that. And it is for that reason that this motion is here before us today. It's clear for me that I want to support the only Indigenous group in Richmond Hill that has taken the time to come out and work with us, work with staff, and come up with a land acknowledgement that is appropriate. The consultation was already done. And to hire this professional, I don't believe that staff should have done that. And I would move at this time that council direct staff not to hire this person. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the city manager, how much have you agreed to pay this person, and have they been retained?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they have been retained. And the cost of the contract, I have Lise Conde online, is approximately around $18,000. Lise can confirm.
Wow. Sorry, did I hear you correctly, Madam City Manager? You have unilaterally decided to hire an expert. Who is this expert, and how did you determine this expert?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to refer to Lise to let council know the process that we went through to retain the consultant and who we have selected. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we developed or reached out to municipalities who'd done work with on Indigenous issues, developed a list of potential consultants. And then because we anticipated this to be a low value acquisition, which we could then send out a scope of work to consultants and ask them to provide us with feedback on whether or not they could do the work. We proceeded to do that. We have hired a firm called Shared Path, who has done work with other municipalities, specifically to develop land acknowledgements, but other projects where Indigenous expertise was required.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do you have a copy of that contract available for us to look at here today?
This is the standard terms and conditions of the city for purchase orders, which I believe is available on the city's website.
I'll ask the question again through you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Conde, do you have a copy of the agreement with this expert? I'm trying to establish, do you have a clause in that agreement that says that council can cancel the contract? Is there a provision in there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the standard terms and conditions for purchase orders include a termination clause, yes.
How much have we, through you, how much have we spent so far? How much have we incurred in costs?
We have engaged the consultant. We have not yet received any invoices for their work.
Yeah, that was not the question I asked. How much do we owe them? How much time and work have they put in to this point? Is my question. How much are you expected to pay them if we were to cancel the contract today?
I think that would be something we would have to negotiate with them as part of the termination, but they have done minimal work thus far.
When you say minimal work, what would you estimate would be the amount of work they've done on this?
It's entirely possible they have not done anything more than some very preliminary information since we just signed the PO with them earlier this month.
On which day did you sign that?
June 13th.
June 13th, that would be a few days ago, a week ago. Mr. Mayor, under the circumstances, I'm going to move that we immediately terminate this contract with the expert. Council never gave direction to staff to engage them. Council has been very clear in the past that anytime monies are to be expended, that we go through the proper budgeting process. This was not brought through the budgeting process. Although Ms. Conde believes that this is a small, I forget the exact words she used, but a small item, budget item, it's $18,000 to ask someone to come up with a land acknowledgement. So I move that this council immediately directs staff to cancel this contract before we incur any costs and continue with the direction that was given to them, which was to consult the indigenous community, not to hire a professional, so-called expert and spend $18,000. That would be my motion at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Clerk procedurally about that. I want to be clear it's my understanding that the consultant is not hired to specifically make the land acknowledgement, but they are specifically there to help go through the consultations that the motion that we passed unanimously a little while ago asked for. So there's more to the story, I think, than that. I mean, if staff can correct me if I'm incorrect on that assumption, but a good part of the job of this organization that we've hired is to do a consultation. So that's also a part of the equation. Mr. Clerk, I'm not sure here, but we've got a motion to refer on the floor, which I'm not sure how Councillor Pirelli's suggestion fits into that procedurally, if you could help with that.
Thank you to Mr. Mayor and to members of council. Section 5.6.5 of the procedure bylaw to per admitted motions order says, when a motion has been moved or seconded and is being considered by council, no motion shall be received except the following motions: adjournment, proceed beyond 11 p.m., close the debate, defer, refer, or amend. So in other words, the motion on the floor that was made by Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, seconded by Councillor Munch, that is the motion. A motion to refer is permitted. It would be my advice that Councillor Pirelli's proposed motion does not fit into one of those accepted categories. It is not an adjournment. It is not proceeding beyond 11 p.m. It is not to close the debate. It's not to defer. It's not to refer, and it's not an amendment. And so therefore, it would be my advice that it doesn't fit into 5.6.5.
Okay, thank you. So I will agree with that. Councillor Pirelli, you have a bit of time left if you'd like.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the clerk, is it permitted to make an amendment to the referral motion? No, this referral motion.
Thank you. Through the chair, a motion to refer may be debated and amended.
Thank you. My amendment is that if we are to refer this back, as stated, that we direct staff to cancel the contract with the consultant because it was never approved by council. $18,000 is not a small amount of money. It's a large amount of money. And it didn't go through the budget process. And I don't believe that we should be spending that money. Staff were directed to do the consultation with the community. Staff were not directed to hire a consultant to do the consulting with the Indigenous community. And to be clear, Ms. Conde specifically stated that this group was hired because of their expertise in writing land acknowledgements. So my amendment is that we immediately cancel the contract with this organization and that staff continue to do the consultation with the Indigenous community, as was stated earlier.
Okay, Mr. Clerk. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if that's a valid amendment to a referral motion. I'd ask for your guidance on that.
To you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can phrase it this way. Regional Councillor Prelli is proposing an amendment that directs staff to terminate the contract with the Indigenous consultant, whereas the actual motion on the floor refers the matter to the city's Indigenous consultant. So it appears to be two contradictory clauses. That would be my.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prelli.
Well, respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I disagree with the clerk's interpretation. This motion speaks to the city's Indigenous consultant. It does not say the paid expert that was hired. The city certainly has Indigenous consultants on staff. That's who we asked to do the consultation. We asked staff. By virtue of the motion that passed by this council, we made staff Indigenous consultants. And therefore, it is not contradictory to the motion. All I'm stating is that we continue with the city's Indigenous consultants, not the paid one that was not authorized and extremely expensive at $18,000 to come up with a land acknowledgement. That this is unconscionable. So I disagree, Mr. Mayor, with the clerk's interpretation. I believe my motion is a proper amendment. We continue with the city's Indigenous consultants. We just don't hire, we cancel the contract with the expert that was hired.
Okay, I don't agree. I think the clerk's made the rationale very clear. So I would say that if you're asking for a ruling on that, my ruling would be that it's not in order at this time.
I challenge the chair.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I haven't seen if they, I know we sometimes do a recorded vote for the challenge with the chair. I'm just asking if there's.
Recorded vote.
Thank you. Very well. Members of council, there's been a challenge to the chair's ruling that the amendment proposed by Regional Local Councillor Prelli is out of order. If you agree with the chair, you will vote yes. If you don't agree with the chair, you will vote no. So voting on the challenge to the chair, Regional Local Councillor Prelli.
No.
Thank you. Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barros. No. Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Silovitz.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. The chair's ruling is sustained.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll continue. I'll now speak to the referral motion. I cannot support this, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Prelli, you actually are have gone over time.
And actually, I was speaking to an amendment, Mr. Mayor. You can ask the clerk.
Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you just give me a moment, I just want to consult with Tiff.
That's
on the
fine.
timer. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm not precisely aware of the time at which Regional and Local Councillor Prelli did start speaking to the amendment, perhaps with council's consent. Okay. So a small amount of additional time that would be reasonable given that circumstances, and I do apologize.
All right, if you can work with that, Councillor Prelli, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe everything that needed to be said was said here today, especially by the delegates, the two Native people, Indigenous people. And I'm very I'm very discouraged by the fact that this referral motion is going back yet again, and the cost of $18,000 spent for a land acknowledgement. Clearly, an expert that was hired who has done land acknowledgements would simply need to take one of those land acknowledgements and send it to the city. $18,000 to do a consultant? I'm sorry, I just can't agree with this. I think we have a land acknowledgement that was approved by the Indigenous Action Committee. It was consulted through their elders, as was stated, and is in fact a proper land acknowledgement, unlike the one that our consultants suggested prior to this that was a treaty acknowledgement and was very offensive. Mr. Mayor, members of the public, it is very clear what's going on here today. It was alluded to by the delegates, and I'm very disappointed that we're at this point, that this is being politicized. And I will not vote in support of a referral motion when we have a very good land acknowledgement before us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to ask our acting city manager a couple of questions, if that's okay. Acting City Manager Jocelyn, it's my understanding that you have a discretionary consulting budget that is approved by council for you to use in just such a situation. Am I correct in that? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the city manager's office does have a consulting budget to accommodate a myriad of items that we need to reach out to expertise or consultants for. It's approved through the operating budget. So I do have an operating budget to support this initiative.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. I just wanted to make sure that that was correct and that the public record reflects that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this? Okay, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I understand correctly, we can make a referral motion over a referral motion, right? A motion to refer. I would like to refer this referral motion to the next meeting. I need to understand, as you said, there are more to the stories. I would like to have a more understanding of the status of the consultant. I would like staff to report back on the next meeting regarding the hiring of the consultant.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, I'm not sure you can have a referral of a referral. But if you could give us a opinion on that. The good news is we are learning a lot about procedure today.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I apologize. It actually is not clear here. I'm just rereading clause B of that section I left, which said that those motions that are in order above shall only be made when no member is speaking and have precedence and be decided in the order in which they are listed. So the order that matters are listed it doesn't list two refers, so I apologize, this is a question I've never faced before, and I'm trying to read the full section in its entirety here. Have precedence and be decided in the order in which they are listed. So I would suggest that you actually can't do a referral of a referral because it doesn't have precedence. There's no precedence. There was a question here of whether this is actually what you're proposing is a deferral versus a referral. So a referral, of course, would be to a staff or another body, whereas deferral would actually just delay consideration of this to whatever meeting you'd set out. In the event that you propose a deferral, deferral does appear before referral, so that would have precedence over a motion to refer and would be in order.
Okay, a motion to defer would be
Would
in
be in
order. A
order,
motion to
but not
refer
a-
would
would
not.
not.
So Councillor Leo, I don't know that that helps you.
That helps a lot because my understanding is, the options are adjournment, close the debate, refer, and defer. So I'm happy with the deferral motion. I want to defer it to the next meeting so that staff can report back, regarding the hiring of the consultant.
Okay. So we need a seconder for that. Okay, Councillor Chan, I see your card.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Liu, for that. Initially, I was thinking about speaking the referral motion because there's no date mentioned. Refer back to staff until when. So Councillor Liu's motion does, as a deferral motion, do have the date. So we would have information coming back, I guess, 2 weeks from now. But I think that we all want to do the right thing and ensuring the content is appropriate, respectful, and inclusive. And we spend more time talking about the consultant versus the content and the intent of the land acknowledgement. So on that basis, I'm not going to speak more other than let's have the issue come back in 2 weeks. And that's why I'll be happy to second the deferral, because then at least we have a set date. Because the referral motion in front of us, actually, I was about to ask, there's no date yet, but maybe it's moot point now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to defer on the floor. Councillor Pirelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Liu for trying to bring some reasonableness to this whole agenda item. My comment to the deferral is that I like the time frame. I do wish that in the next 2 weeks, that the city manager may reach out to this hired expert and show them the land acknowledgement that I proposed here today and see if he would be okay with that land acknowledgement. Maybe, for a few $100s, he could say, yes, that's good. It's relevant, it's accurate, and it's reasonable, and it's respectful. And then we can, just move this land acknowledgement at the next council meeting. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just really confused about what's taking place here, because just now Councillor Pirelli stated that we shouldn't be hiring the consultant, an outside consultant, and now we're trying to ask for the opinion of said consultant that we're contesting about hiring for an opinion on the acknowledgement.
Point of order, Councillor Pirelli.
Mr. Mayor, can you caution the member, please, to not put words in my mouth? It was clear what I did. I tried to cancel the contract.
Councillor
Pirelli. It was
Pirelli.
not allowed. And now the member is saying that I'm contradicting myself.
Okay, Councillor
Please
Pirelli,
ask the
I think
member to
factually
apologize, please. Can you let me finish, please? Very disrespectful when you speak when others are speaking.
Yeah, and points of order need to be done quickly and so we can get on back to the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, tell me what your definition of quickly is.
Actually, point of order.
I understand what your concern is, and my comment back to you was going to be that what Councillor Shepherd said was that you had initially spoke about not being in favor of the consultant, and then a moment ago you said that you would like to refer this back to the consultant to get their opinion on the wording. So I think what she said is factually correct. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the entire reason we had to outsource and hire an outside consultant was precisely because this council could not come up with a course of action that was agreed to by all parties. In this particular situation.
Point of order. The member just stated the council couldn't come up with a course of action. That is factually incorrect and very disrespectful. This council was very specific and said, consult with the Indigenous community.
Okay.
Have the member apologize, please.
I don't think that that's the course of action. We have not been able to agree on this for the last 4 years. So I don't think that that's really that far out of the realm. Councillor Shepherd, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will continue in that case. It is my opinion that since we could not cohesively come up with a course of action, that the hiring of an outside consultant in this case is necessary to ensure that the interests of all Indigenous people in Richmond Hill are represented. The city manager and within the purview of their powers have up the authority to hire consultants. I believe, Miss City Manager, if I'm correct, up to $20,000. Is that correct? What is the monetary value?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a consulting budget that would accommodate this.
Okay, fantastic.
Consultant at their $18,000.
And it's my understanding that it's part of hiring this consultant is not specifically with respect to the land acknowledgement, but as part of the broader DEI commitment that we have. Is that correct? Or was the consultant specifically hired for the land acknowledgement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll refer to Lise, who can outline the scope of work, but it is, we were certainly very specific on the community consultation and comprehensive consultation with the Indigenous communities to do some research in terms of getting those groups right and who we needed to consult with, and to use their expertise and experience in drafting the land acknowledgement. But Ms. Condi, if I've missed anything regarding their scope of work.
Thank you. So my only position is rather than making this a political thing, I think we should allow the consultant to do their job, to look into this acknowledgement as well as any other acknowledgement that anyone wants to put forth in the next period of time, and then to make an informed decision that's going to benefit all of us. So because of that, unfortunately, I can't support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'd like to, I haven't spoken yet. So I'm not in favor of the deferral. I guess the thing is that I believe that given the difficulties that we've had with this, and including the learning that we've all had through the last acknowledgement that was proposed and that we've ended up with a motion to refer, or sorry, to go with some consultations to get it right, that I think that the path forward, it's quite clear to me that the path forward is appropriate to hire somebody that is an Indigenous consultant that can help us through the process. I am aware of some of the work that this particular company has done in other York Region municipalities, and they've done a really good job, and it was a very positive experience. And that actually is the primary reason why I would like to see a very positive experience come out of this, where we as a council are very sure that we know that there has been consultations that have been done extensively and with the right people, and including the Indigenous Action Committee, by the way, and make sure that when that the wording comes back, that we can stand behind it, every single one of us, and get a unanimous approval for this. This is what I wanted right from the very beginning of this whole situation several years ago. And I also do believe that there's learning that will be valuable through this process for our staff, relationship building, that we may have started some of these relationships before, but we need to be building on those, because the land acknowledgement is really just the first thing that we're doing. I mean, we've actually got the Indigenous Action Committee up in place and they're doing good work, and that's great. But I am quite certain that there's other things that we can be doing as well. And this was always meant to be the beginning of a process that we embark on as a community. And if that means hiring a consulting firm who is Indigenous, has done it before, who knows who we're supposed to contact, who knows the questions that we're supposed to ask, who's been through this process before, I think it's money very well spent. And although, to Councillor Shepherd's point, this is not specifically the DEI strategy, this whole, the initial land acknowledgement wording came out of the DEI strategy as a part of the DEI strategy. So this is an important component of it. And, you know, I am quite confident, given the history that we've had with this particular topic, that hiring somebody with that level of expertise, which our staff does not have, and I dare say our council does not have, we will be certain to build on the work that the Indigenous Action Committee has proposed, and that's great. And we'll go through the process. We'll give that wording to the Indigenous consulting firm, get them to do that plus anything else that needs to be done. And when it comes back, I am fully expecting that this will come back and everybody will have the confidence and the understanding that this is something that we can stand behind and be proud of, all of us. So that would be my my comments. I don't like the fact that this has become a more raucous discussion than I would have liked to have seen. I'm not maybe surprised by that, but I think at the end of the day, I'm very much, this is not about what the Indigenous Action Committee has done and work to do. And I appreciate the work that they have done on this, but I think that we've already embarked and we unanimously agreed upon a strategy when we decided not to do the last land acknowledgement. This is a consistent approach that we've agreed on, and we are changing our course right now by not accepting the consultation that we all agreed that we needed to do. So those would be my comments. I won't support this. I will support the referral if we get back to that, because I really do believe that that is the best way for our community at this point in time to get off on the right foot and make sure that we get this done properly and with absolute confidence. So that would be those would be my comments. Thank you. Okay, so we have, unless there's anybody else.
Recorded vote.
Okay. To speak, we have a deferral motion on the floor. Recorded vote has been called, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, voting on the motion to defer this matter to the July 6th for a report back from staff as set out on your screen. Regional Local Councillor Parley.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Silovitz.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
No.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
No.
Thank you. Mayor West.
No.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barros.
Yes.
That deferral carries.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then, we have, let's see, we've got, right, sorry, 13.5, and that was pulled by Councillor Chan. Councillor Chan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have looked at the staff report. Actually, it's primarily 4 pages, but I am mindful that in this particular case, I do understand, as the wording said, is proprietary. So it's almost like we have no option but enter into a further procurement with this particular company that actually the city have already engaged back in 1999. That's 23 years ago. Before I would move on to recommendation so that the city would, our council would direct staff to continue the engagement with the same company for another 3.5 years. I want to have the comfort knowing, number one, whether in fact, what would be the contingency, what would be alternative? Because I can almost envision 2 years from now or 3 years from now, the future council will be asked in the same position. This company was engaged back in 1999. We have to continue to use them, retain them, I should say. Now, mind you, having said that, I should say that having the online portal is certainly a very welcome move, particularly for our residents, also actual businesses, whoever would have the water account with the city, because they can check online anytime at their convenience about everything on the account as well as payment. So through Mr. Chair, I gather this would be to our IT staff, particularly on page 3. Help me understand that, in fact, the current recommendation here is to cover money we don't have enough for the previous approved contract. Is that correct for you, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Jones?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Just over the last few years, cost of inflation and some consulting services, we fell a little short on the initial forecast.
Thank you. Help me understand then, Mr. Jones, for Mr. Chair, is that what are I'm sure that there are kind of management control or balances from my end, I'd like to have more certainty and comfort. If this is being approved by council today, what's in front of us, what the kind of control measure or step might be taken, learning from the experience now, that maybe not 2 years from now, even for 3.5 years contract, the same situation will repeat itself, meaning that overspending, so to speak, so that approved budget amount is not enough to cover for the duration of the contract. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. If I understand it correctly, you're asking the approach that was taken, and is this the right method? Okay, sure, no problem. So just to provide a little more context, the function that the vendor has provided is now available, which is the online portal. So some of the reasoning behind it is we use the existing water billing system, and this function is now available. So this scope allows us to enable the portal with the existing solution intact, reducing the risk of third-party integrations, vendor compliances, and that it is such a critical service. So the approach was taken more that we've worked with the company, we're satisfied with the product that delivers the water billing software, and this is a feature that is now enabled natively within the application. So the opportunity cost is enabling the feature, which comes with additional service costs, versus going out competitively for an entire new water billing feature, or at the very least a potential third-party integrator that adds that level of complexity and support that wouldn't be provided natively within the tool today.
Thank you for that response. Yes, I do agree that, as I said earlier, it's certainly a great tool in terms of providing customer service, and I would hope internally help to improve efficiency and processing, as Mr. Jones is saying. So if I understand correctly, help me understand. So maybe one of the rationale for the city need more money to cover even the current budget in this same ask is that because the CIS Infinity Portal is implemented this year, which apparently, if I understand correctly, might not have been estimated in the previous contract when council was asked to approve it. Is that correct? Or is it kind of partially correct? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Over the last few years, there's been a few consulting engagements required to enable some of the digital transformation as a result of the COVID pandemic. So some of the additional expenditures were to enable some of the features to take various forms of payments and to enable interfaces. The stormwater modeling change, for example, had some calculations. So the original amount, there was a little bit of a consulting dollars there, which is why it fell short from the multiple.
Right. Now,
the actual contract itself was well defined and understood.
Thank you. Given our long-standing contractual relationship with this company, I understand certainly from the city perspective, our staff have been accustomed to the way they've been dealing with it and so on, and continuity. However, I just want to get a sense through you, Mr. Chair, from Mr. Jones. Is that the same company providing services to other municipalities for the same purpose, to the extent that you know are not contravening any commercial kind of information or secrets?
Yes, this system is used by numerous municipalities.
Okay. As I said, I just want to have the comfort of knowing the kind of questions I'm directing, because it does seem to me like what some people call evergreening contract, because of proprietary, you just almost sign on with them for life. It's just a matter of continue. So at some point in time, I would like to see that as an opportunity to look at the other alternative in the market. I'm not an IT person, but I hear so much about this cloud-based applications. Perhaps there may be some alternative can be provided down the road. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm almost time. I'm happy to move the recommendation as in the staff report. However, I give caution. I want to see down the road before the expiry of this current contract or contract to be entered into, report back from staff as to what are the contingency and potential alternatives. Because continue since 1999 without considering any other option for both process improvement and cost efficiency is inappropriate.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Pirelli, you got your hand up. Will you second this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see the motion on the screen, please. I believe Councillor Chan added a qualifying statement. Is that part of your motion, Councillor Chan?
I have not added, but I did comment to say that have staff come back before the end of the new contract to provide the alternatives for the future services. Perhaps on that prompt from Councillor Pirelli, if Mr. Chair, you allow me, if your indulgence, I would like to add a C there with capturing what I just said.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Pirelli, for that.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Subject to Councillor Chan, confirmation on that was his intent. And I would even ask Mr. Jones to confirm that I've captured the name of the software versus the company or the purpose of the software correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. It's the intent is there, but also look forward to hearing from Mr. Jones about whether all the proper software are coded or system appropriately. Thank you. I'm satisfied from a content perspective. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Mr. Jones, is that Mr. Clerk is suggesting that could we get some input from you as to whether that's the correct wording?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The software and the vendor name are correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion. I want to thank Councillor Chan for separating this item for discussion. I had intended on separating it, asking very much the same questions. So I want to thank Councillor Chan for doing that. Councillor Chan has always demonstrated that he's a very inquisitive person. He wants to know the facts. More for confirmation. I'm sure he understood the report as I did, but we're both seeking confirmation for the facts behind the report. And we always want to be as transparent as possible when it comes to this type of sole sourcing and the reasons for it. So for that reason, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank Councillor Chan, and I'm happy to second the motion and support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? That carries unanimously. All right, so that brings us to the end, I believe, of our items. So we have bylaws 16.1 through 16.8. I need a motion to pass those bylaws. Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Chan, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that's carried. And bylaw to confirm the proceedings of this meeting, 18.1 on the agenda. Regional Local Councillor Pirelli and Councillor Barros, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that carries. And last but not least, item is the motion to adjourn. Councillor DiPaolo and Councillor Shepherd, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that carries unanimously. Thank